Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, brought to you by the Wealthy Speaker School. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Hey, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson, and we are in for a treat today because we're joined by a long-time success story in the speaking industry, Mr. Mark Sanborn. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Jane, and I'm glad you said long time and not old.
Well, I just said to you before we started that we're both going to feel old because you have been in this business for quite some time. How many years have you been in the speaking business?
Full-time for 33 years.
33 years. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I'm 30 plus or something. And I'm pretty sure you were on the scene when I arrived. So I want to get back to, I wanted to talk about your kind of history and your career and your success. But let's talk just momentarily. You have a book coming out in a very short period of time. It'll be out by the time this podcast releases, called The Intention Imperative. Tell us about the premise for The Intention Imperative.
You bet. Well, I'm always excited when I release a new book. And by the way, the backstory about releasing a book every 2 to 3 years is that when you're in the business for a long time, you have to demonstrate to the marketplace you have something new and interesting to say. You can't just keep rehashing material that once worked. So I make a concerted effort. This is my 8th book, and my typical release dates are about 2 to 3 years in between. And this book, The Intention Imperative, is about a very simple concept that applies as much to speakers as it does to CEOs. Mm-hmm. And that is that nobody gets to the top of Mount Everest accidentally. You know, you're never walking the dog and you make the wrong turn and boom, you know, you're on top of the highest.
Right.
It takes months and months and months of planning. You and I both know speakers that have summited Mount Everest. And it got me to thinking about the fact that for years I've been asked, you know, what's the one thing all great leaders have in common? What's the one thing all successful people have in common? And I've always been honest because I never really could say with confidence what that one thing was.
Right.
Until a few years ago, I was working with some of the folks we talked about earlier, the 5 Friends, and we were doing a 2-day event.
Tell everybody who the 5 friends are. They might not know.
You bet. Randy Pennington, Scott McCain, Larry Winget, Joe Calloway, and myself. And we still are great friends. We aren't doing the consulting as a group, although Randy and Larry and Joe are Ultimate Business Summit. So we were meeting, and as we were listening to all of these different entrepreneurs and business people, it became apparent that probably the one thing that was perplexing them more than anything else was a lack of clarity. They started out with clarity, or they lost clarity, or they got distracted, or they were chasing the next shiny object. So I started thinking about this, and I believe that to have sustainable success, not one-hit wonder, not a short success, but to have sustainable success, you've got to do 2 things. Number 1, you've got to be crystal clear on what you're trying to do. And number 2, you need to take consistent action every day to do it. Now, I know that sounds but simple, but think about this. How often have you and I met a speaker and you say, what's your message or what do you speak about? And it changes during the conversation. You know, I'm thinking about this, but I also do that, and I might do something different. And as soon as you become clear, and that doesn't mean you won't ever adjust. I'm not being silly about, you know, staying rigid in your thinking. But once you're clear on what it is you want to do, then the next question, and this came up with Dr. Nito Cabane at High Point University, who's a longtime friend. You know, he once said, you know, what do you do every day to achieve your goals and fulfill your vision? And it doesn't have to be 8 or 10 or 20 or 30 things. I like to think in terms of 2 or 3 things, or what I call the trifecta. Every day I wake up and I say, if I'm successful, what are the 3 most important things in rank order I'm going to accomplish today? And if you do that as a speaker, if you do that in whatever role you're in life, you will consistently and gradually attain what it is that you're after. So that's what the intention imperative is.
I love it. I love it. And I think that if people walk away with 2 things from today's podcast, it's about clarity which it's just so funny that you use the exact same words that we use over here in our Ready Aim Fire process.
Well, great minds think alike.
Get crystal clear on what you're selling is step number one in our process. And I always talk about clarity equals confidence. Without it, it's very difficult to be confident in moving forward in your initiatives. And
Jane,
consistency.
can I interject? Let me interject because I'm ADD and I'll forget. Our mutual friend Joe Calloway says that one of the greatest skills, and I agree that you need in any business, is the ability to say no. And one of the signs of a speaker that isn't clear or confident is they will say yes to things they shouldn't. And it'll hurt their development or their brand or their reputation. So when you're clear on what you do, you also need to be clear on what you don't do. And some years ago, I said, I'm not going to do 2, 3, and 6 hour seminars anymore. I did hundreds of them. But I was at a point where I wanted to focus on keynoting, and life became so much easier when I could say, don't do that. No thanks. Here's somebody that does.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to give props too. Let me circle back to the whole premise of Pick a Lane that actually started with our mutual friend, Joe Calloway. So let's really allow people to get a snapshot of your business, because back when you were baby-faced Mark, I'm thinking you had a struggle getting the business because people might not have taken you seriously. And we may have some listeners of our podcast who are new to the scene. They're fresh faces, and credibility may become a thing for them. Was that ever a thing for you?
It definitely was, but I was fortunate in that I started so long ago, we didn't have VHS video. And I'm not making this up. We sent out audio cassette tapes.
Oh.
And so the meeting planner would hear me and the audience reaction and say, I want to hire this guy. I'll never forget Montgomery Ward. This is 30 plus years ago. Meeting planner in Kansas City hired me. I showed up. I introduced myself, and honestly, I thought she was going to faint. She kind of got, her head spun a little bit because in the room, I was a good 10 years to 20 years younger than everybody in the room. These were all store managers back then. Now, what's interesting is that today, I think being fresh-faced has two potential benefits that being in the business for many years don't. The first is clients want younger presenters that can speak to the new generation in the workplace. I have friends that are experts on millennial differences, but there's a difference between being a 60-year-old expert on 3 generations behind you and being part of that generation teaching older managers how to deal with them. The other thing, and people say, Mark, what's your greatest strength and your liability? And they're actually the same thing. And that is my longevity in the business. I'll never be the new guy, the next big thing. Now, if God blesses me with another best-selling book, and I trust him, but I doubt, the odds, I'm an economist by training, the odds of that are astronomically slim. Then maybe I'll get a little bit of a boost. But what people want is someone who they haven't heard before, who others are hearing and really relating to. So as a younger speaker, as long as you are competent on the platform and your material is good, the fact that you have video and the internet, we didn't have way back when, won't be nearly as big a liability as it was when I began in the Jurassic period, when you had to be at least 40 to 50 to have any wisdom.
Right. And with YouTube, there's a lot of YouTube sensations and social media sensations that have really opened up the door for everybody at every age level to be a part of this business. Okay, so let's walk us through your business, and maybe as you go, 1 or 2 of the flashpoints that sent your business up to the next level more quickly.
That's a great thing to do, because right up front, I will say that joining the National Speakers Association while I was still in college was strategic. I was speaking part-time. I worked my way through college as an after-dinner speaker, making $100, $150, $250, speaking to local groups, ag groups. I was an ag economist, to be more specific. And I knew that the best time to learn to be a success was before you depended on it, right? In other words, I wanted to learn the speaking business, even though I was only in it part-time. So by joining the NSA, that cut years off my learning curve. And I then became a professional member after I graduated from college. I was in sales and marketing for about 7 years. This is also important. So many people say to me, Mark, I just want to speak right out of college. And that's a possibility, but the question begs itself, what do you have to talk about?
Right.
I was at a cocktail party once and I met a woman who introduced herself as a success coach. And I said, wow, that's fascinating. What have you done? She said, I just graduated from CU. And I thought, well, unless you're talking about how to be really successful in graduating from CU, I'm sorry, but there's not a lot of life experience there. So I think it's important to do something. For me, I've always stayed involved in leadership, philanthropic, served on boards, and later served as the president of NSA, because that was my topic. And you have more credibility talking about what you've done, not giving a book report.
Right.
So I started speaking full time, and my first couple of years I did public seminar, and that's a different subject for a different day. The public seminar business was very different back then, and it was, if nothing else, a great way to learn your chops, because
road work.
Yeah, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, different city every day. You either got better or you died. I mean, it was tough, and it made me better. And then I just launched out on my own about the time a lot of the other folks we mentioned and the 5 friends did. That's why we've been friends for these many years, as we met through the speaking profession. The flashpoint for me is in 2004, when I was president of the National Speakers Association. I'd been warned that, wow, you're going to invest so much time in NSA, your business will suffer. And certainly there were examples of presidents that happened to, but I got lucky. The Fred Factor launched in 2004, and that was on the bestseller list for 38 weeks, not 1 week, and then it disappeared.
Right.
And that really was, I was already speaking, 80, 90 times a year, but that increased my demand and my ability to charge more and speak a little less and still realize my financial goals. So that was fortuitous timing. I wrote a sequel to the book, and people said to me, Mark, why didn't you put all your eggs in the book basket, carton, whatever the metaphor is? And I said, because someday Fred Factor isn't going to be that big a deal. It's not going to be a hot topic. And even though it's been a perennial, even though it's had legs, the demand for that is much less now than the other topics that I talk about.
Right. How many books do you think you've sold of the Fred Factor?
Well, we know about 1 million in the U.S. and 1 million internationally. Some countries don't do a great job of reporting after the first few reports.
Right.
You read between the lines on that. But we were coming up on 1 million when some of those bigger countries went in the weeds.
Okay.
Nice. The title to be a leader was my second best. And by the way, I just want to say we've got to be careful. My book, any book I've written, was a bestseller on Amazon for an hour. And today we use bestsellers so loosely, we've kind of destroyed the credibility. And I'm not passing judgment, but I'll tell you 2 things that your listeners might be really interested in. And the first is that I've never had a publisher ask me if I had a bestseller. All publishers care about is how many books you sold. And so having a bestseller is credibility, but it isn't going to get you more book deals. It's about how many books you sell. The second thing that I will mention is now that everybody's a bestseller, nobody's a bestseller, because the marketplace doesn't say, well, is your book a bestseller on Amazon, or is it a bestseller in your local paper, or is it a bestseller on the Wall Street Journal, or is it a bestseller in New York Times? We just conflated all of those together and created amazing confusion. And anymore, I think this idea of, short of being Jim Collins or Patrick Lencioni, one of the truly big names in the business community, Simon Sinek, I think people kind of dismiss that, oh yeah, another speaker with a best-selling book. Right.
It's lost its credibility. But 1 million books, over millions of books, that, my friend, has legs. Okay, so one of the flashpoints was the Fred Factor, which happened to go big time. What's another flashpoint that you've had in your business? Was there a moment where you said, okay, I'm going all in on leadership. This is all I'm going to do. I'm going to scrape away some of the distractions around me. And was that helpful for you?
That was. I straddled two topics. I think most people think the Fred Factor is a customer service book. I didn't write it as a customer service book, but as long as you buy it, I don't care what you call it. I wrote it as a business philosophy book because I think those four principles apply to leadership and sales as well as customer service. But my book, You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader, was kind of an interesting take. I'd been doing leadership for years, but it occurred to me that, having a title gave you a position on the org chart, but it didn't give you credibility.
Right.
John Gardner once said, we've all worked for leaders that couldn't lead a group of 7-year-olds to an ice cream truck. And so I always tell people that skills confirm leadership, not titles. And I have nothing against titles, but I started talking about creating leaders at every level. And that was that book was a legitimate bestseller. It sold less than the Fred Factor, but that book did very well and was embraced a lot at the educational level, the collegiate level. A lot of people over the years have said they read that book in their classes. And then I started writing books on topics that were of interest to leaders. The encore effect, how to be the kind of person people want more of. The Fred 2.0 book, Always Win. All of my books, really, the umbrella is leadership, but the underlying theme, and somebody pointed this out to me years ago, the underlying theme of all my work is that nobody can prevent you from choosing to be extraordinary. I think extraordinary is a choice. And when I teach people about how to become more extraordinary, and typically it's in work, in the public arena, but it applies to their personal lives, being better husbands and wives and fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters. Truth is transferable. And I've always tried to write from that perspective, that if you picked up my book in 20 years, the stories would be dated, obviously, but the principles would still be valid.
Beautiful. Now you're sitting, I can see you, but our audience cannot because we're just doing this recording on audio, but you're sitting in your off-site office. Talk about why you decided, I'm sure you had your office in your home at one point in time. Talk about the transition and moving out into an actual office, and why did you make that choice?
It was a good choice I made years ago. This is my second office. The first quote-unquote office I bought was actually a condo, a townhome. And I had at one point 2 or 3 employees. It was about 900 square feet. I worked upstairs. They worked downstairs. We probably violated the homeowners' covenants, but everyone loved us because they were gone during the day and we were there keeping an eye on things, and we were gone at night. So we were perfect neighbors. Never once got a complaint.
Right.
And the reason that I bought it is because when I wanted to move outside my home, I didn't want 2 or 3 people coming into my home. And frankly, 2 or 3 people didn't want to come into my home. When I did that, I did it as an investment strategy because instead of paying a rent or a lease, which I did, my first office was in a bank. I decided, why not take that money, which is tax advantaged, and invest it in a property that I own. Now, when you sell that property, and I'm no accountant here, but pretty simple math. When you sell it, you still get taxed regular
Capital gains.
So, there is that. But if you give your landlord $1,000 a month, other than the deduction, you got nothing to show at the end of the year. I've got office space. So then I wanted to find a commercial space, and we found this building, Park Ridge office space, when it was concrete and glass. And one of the most fun things I've ever done is build the office. We have about 2,200 square feet. My wife and I and our architects designed it, and it was so gratifying to see this just big, open, cavernous space become the office that it is today. And I can have clients in. I have a boardroom that I can meet with executive teams. And it's really, for me, now we're empty nesters, but for years, having kids at home, hard to get things done and, not be distracted. So it's been great to have a refuge that I can come to. And it's been appreciating in value because of the growth around it. So it was a practical decision based on both finance and on lifestyle.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about who's there with you. Talk about Helen. She's been with you for a long time. How has it been? And I really want this episode to be aspirational for people who are just starting out or kind of in that intermediate level. Ooh, maybe someday I'm going to have my own office. Maybe someday I'm going to find myself a Helen. Talk a little bit about what Helen does for you and how that has helped your business.
Okay, well, here's a principle. I think one of the quickest ways to kill your speaking career is to spend money before you have it. I always advise people to wait until you're really crammed before you rent an office, to wait until you're incredibly busy before you hire an assistant. Because
Got it.
sometimes we think spending money makes us successful, and all it does is it drains our cash flow.
Right.
That's why it was so many years I started my home and then a leased office and then a building I bought. But Helen is my agent. She's offsite. She's virtual. She represents other speakers as well. But one of the things that was important to me, and I spent a lot of years selling myself, but I was such a pushover. Even though I was clear on what I did, I wasn't always good at saying, no, I won't go to, Bumwang, Oregon in the middle of a blizzard for half my normal fee, because they drop in there that there was an orphan in the audience that would benefit from hearing me. And I'm only being partially facetious there. So the nice thing is, Helen has got great sales chops. She's a terrific person. By the way, in my book, I always say, I talk about culture. I always say hire for culture, not just for function. You don't want somebody representing you that isn't on the same page, doesn't have the same values, doesn't have the same service ethic. And sometimes you can find somebody cheaper, but they will haunt you. We've all made bad hiring decisions. It's inevitable if you're in the business long enough. But you want to find somebody who has the same culture, same fit and approach to business that you do.
Yeah.
In my office, a full-time office manager. I've just gone virtual. I basically started farming out my products, a lot that could be converted from physical products into digital products. I also just shipped a pallet full of product to a fulfillment service that I'm working with. And my full-time assistant got a real estate license, so it was kind of a collaborative effort. I waited until she was established, and I have a virtual assistant. So that works great for me because the virtual assistant and Helen and I are kind of I'm making a triangle sign, which nobody can see but you. But we're kind of
triangle.
Then I have a tech guy because when it comes to technology, I could learn it, but I don't have time to. That's not my strong suit. And he's my webmaster and handles all things technological. And then if you really wanted to parse it out, I have a literary agent who I work with a lot. We're very close. He's in Orange County. And finally, I have a social media posting service. Everything you read is something I've written. So what they do is they basically do a better job of posting it than I could by scheduling it through some kind of a service. So the whole team now is virtual. I'm happy as a clam, and I still get to come to my office.
That's beautiful. Tell us about, let's circle back to intention to finish us off here. What can a speaker do to be more intentional about their business if they want to have a 30-plus year career like you've had?
Well, first, I will say that sometimes you will need short-term imbalance if you ever hope to have long-term balance. And early on, one of the reasons why speakers tend to do a lot of topics and tend to chase a lot of rabbits is because they have to. If nobody comes out of the gate, closing enough business that's really specific to only what they want to do to build out. So sometimes you have to do what you need to do. Just make sure that it's within a perimeter that makes sense long term.
Yeah. So if your intention is that long term, I won't be accepting this business, but I will accept it this month or this year because this is my plan.
Yeah, I did 800 all-day seminars before I ever said, no, I don't want to do that anymore. So, and again, it made me a better speaker. The second thing I would say is reverse engineer your life. The one mistake speakers make is they only think about their speaking career. And, someday believe it or not, and this was a big epiphany to me. I used to, when I was a young whippersnapper, I'd hear older NSA members, in other words, guys my age, complain about traveling and that they were just tired of the road. And I thought, you wimps, how could anyone become tired of traveling?
It's
This is
so
just
fantastic.
bad. And then, I told God I'd never drive a minivan, and I did. And I said I'd never get tired of traveling, and I have. I mean, I still like to travel, but to have to do it to make a living is not something for everyone. So you want to reverse engineer your life, especially when it comes time to for your family. Graduations. If people book you a year in advance, you don't know when your kid graduates from middle school. You could be in Des Moines when your son or daughter's walking across the state.
Right.
But in terms of fee, ask yourself, how much money would you really like to make each year? And then ask yourself, not what is your espoused fee. I always say my fee is $2 million a year. I only have to do half a gig to meet my financial goals. But your fee is what you consistently get. In other words, if you take all the money you made in speaking and divide it by the number of times you spoke, that is your real fee. And if you can consistently get, and I'm going to pick a number, it's arbitrary, $2,500, and you want to make $250,000 next year gross, then
100 gigs.
You've got to do 100 speeches.
Yep.
And not. I'm going to. I just heard somebody say, and they haven't even been speaking full time, that their fee was $25,000. And I'm like, how? How can you do that? How can you just arbitrate? Now, if you're, you just left Congress and you just were famous for something, maybe, but the mere mortals can't do that. So start with that and then move. And then here's what you can juggle, Jane. You can juggle the number of dates you want to work and how much you need to charge. The biggest change I have seen in speaking beyond the technology is that cost of sale is higher than it's ever been. When I started, your cost of sale was an audio cassette recording. I kid you not. And then you printed up one-sheeters, one-pagers, or if you were really sexy, a trifold brochure. Today, there are speakers coming into the business with full-time dial-for-dollar telemarketers, huge social media advertising budgets.
Yeah.
And they are willing to spend much more than a lot of us are, and as a result, we're now competing in this cash-rich environment. So in the old days, we used to say, just be really good. A good speech is your best marketing. Regrettably, it's not enough. You've got to be really good, and you've got to have a business and marketing commensurate with your speaking skills.
Beautiful. Hey, final question.
Yeah.
If you could give your 20-year-old self, I'm not sure the exact age, just starting out in the speaking business, one piece of advice, what would you tell that young, fresh-faced Mark?
Well, believe it or not, I'd say relax. I've been an intense guy my whole life. And when you're intense, you don't even know you're intense. But with a little maturity. And I think, by the way, intensity and discipline are like twins. I think that discipline has helped me a great deal. But there were times I just needed to just have more fun. And one of the nice things I found is when I switched from being just hardcore content to really having fun with the audience, and not only did I have more fun, but the audience did too. And that was a real asset to my business. It sounds, I'm sorry I'm not more profound, but taking ourselves so seriously just never works out in the long run. So take what you do seriously. Take your clients seriously. Just don't take yourself too seriously.
That is just a fabulous piece of advice. I am so glad that you closed on that. Mark Sanborn, your career has been one to bow down to. You have been someone that like I said, you were on the scene when I got here 30 years ago, and you were already doing well. And I just really think that you're a great role model for people. Not only that, you're a nice, good guy.
Well, thank you. You've been a great friend over the years. It's been fun. We've had a chance to collaborate and do things like this, and that's been one of the high points of my career. So thank you, Jane.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mark Sanborn. And if you're tuning in and have enjoyed this episode, hey, let us know. If you're out on iTunes, leave us a rating or a review. We appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. And with that, we will say See you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed our show, you'll want to come and visit us at the Wealthy Speaker School, where we provide a proven roadmap for building your dream business. Go to wealthyspeakerschool.com. And for show notes for today's podcast, head on over to speakerlauncher.com and click on podcast. I'll see you soon, Wealthy Speakers.